Oh, yeah, baby. Grenades. These'll come in handy.
Hello again, I am Blunty, and if you like videos with a nice solid narrative structure that are carefully thought out and sort of move along at a steady pace and sort of hit things point by point, this is not going to be one of those videos. What I want to talk about today is a game and a concept in fiction, and I want to talk about an anime, and the thing that links them all is zombies. So hopefully you find this interesting. I thought it was interesting when I started thinking about it, but then it got stuck in my head and I just had to make a video about it because it wouldn't get out of my head. And I've got other stuff to be doing. All right? So, hello. Zombies. Zombies, man. Zombies. How do you feel about zombies? Before we get started here, let me know what you think about zombies in your games, in your movies, in your TV and whatnot. How do you feel about zombies as a narrative tool? Because I've been thinking about zombies a lot recently, partly because in a couple of weeks the sequel to one of the first truly proper, well-received and widely liked VR games is coming out, and it has zombies in it. In fact, it's pretty much all about zombies. Zombie apocalypse, as a matter of fact. Problem is, with very few exceptions, including the humble Minecraft zombie, I've spent at least the last decade or so, probably more, actively avoiding any media, be it movie or TV or games with zombies in them. I kind of hated zombies. But I'm starting to change my mind again, which is why I use the past tense hated and not hate. Yeah, for a long while before now, just no to everything zombie for me, thank you very much. Except, there are a few exceptions, like the song. There's a song called Zombie by the Cranberries, released in 1994. Every Gen Xer knows it. That track bops, man, except when it breaks your heart into a billion million pieces when you remember what it's actually all about. Because, holy crap. Hi, crushing reality. Can I just enjoy the song, please? No? Okay. Anyway, Arizona Sunshine came out in 2016, back when the first HTC Vive and the original Oculus Rift were the prime consumer-level PC VR hardware. It was at the dawn of the current VR era, a rebirth of VR as a concept at the consumer level. It was still very much in its infancy. Almost everything out there software-wise was described as an experience or a concept, or it was a tech demo or something along those lines. There were very, very few fully formed, AAA-style, full-fat games, narrative games with a beginning, middle and end and levels and all that sort of stuff, instead of just a singular concept explored. And of what there was in proper games, a big chunk of it was sloppily converted flat screen games, which barely worked properly when chucked into a VR mode, because good VR really has to be intended and designed to be VR from the ground up. Almost every single game that got a VR mode added on after the fact, after the game was already designed and done and out, kind of sucked. And Arizona Sunshine was one of the exceptions out there. It was designed for VR from day one. It was designed around first-person experiences and motion controls and 6 degrees of freedom of movement, although under the context of today's lens, one of the ways it shows its age is very much the fact that it defaults to snap turning and teleportation movement and a few other things that we've kind of moved on from as the defaults in VR these days. It's actually slightly jarring to go back to it. But back when it was new, and even with me, a very eager and engaged VR early adopter, I was starving for bespoke VR content and properly made VR games. And even knowing that it was already being well received and well reviewed and people liked it and were praising it and everything, I still didn't bother with it. Why? Why did I deny myself this apparently very good game? Well, it was a zombie survival shooter, and man, was I already so very, very sick of zombie shit, even back in 2016. And like I said in the opening, that was consistent for quite a long time. Last of Us, last of my fucks to give. Walking Dead, Walking Away, DayZ, Days Gone, State of Decay, Resident Evil, Left 4 Dead, Dying Light, Dead Island, World War Z, Dawn of the Dead, whatever it was, no matter how much hype it had, or how good the reviews or fan reaction was, or praise, or whatever, I just could not care. And I would actively just avoid that stuff, ignore it, pretend it didn't exist. I could not care any less about it if I tried. Exceptions, though, within movies, for example, include Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland, and hey, can you pick the key through line there? What made those ones different? Hint, it wasn't because they had zombies in it was in spite of the zombies in them. But games with zombies as the main or even common enemy, you'd have to pay me like a 5-digit number or something to even pretend to care about them. If you know, someone came to me and said, hey, we want you to do a sponsored video of this zombie game, I would be like, yeah, okay, $30,000? How about that? And even then I'd be resentful about it. I mean, not very resentful, because $30,000 is $30,000, but still, you know. And my hate of zombies isn't because I'm a horror genre worse, you know, or because I don't like body horror, or that I find zombies legitimately scary or disturbing in any emotional way, because none of that. I actually kind of like a good zombie design, actually. But mainly it's just because of two core factors. Number one, for a long while there, they felt just so very oversaturated, and just oversaturated in a way that is there a bigger word than oversaturated? Like hyper oversaturated? Mega, super duper they were just everywhere, weren't they? And not in an ironic everywhere way, just in a tedious everywhere way. I mean, Jesus wept. Even Call of Duty, a relatively grounded vanilla military first-person shooter, had a zombie mode jammed into it. And Red Dead Redemption, a gritty, Western, grounded role-playing game with zero mysticism or magic, even that managed to cram in a zombie mode as well, for no remotely plausible reason other than zombies were the trend. Who was out there playing Call of Duty or Red Dead and thinking, man, this game would be more fun if the enemies were zombies? Because combine that with factor 2, zombies are just dull. Zombies are boring as an antagonistic force. They're used in lazy ways by lazy and talentless writers 99% of the time. It doesn't really matter if they're mystical or magical or the result of science gone mad or some kind of accident of nature or whatever the hell mushroom bullshit Last of Us is doing while pretending real hard that they're not really zombies and refusing to call them zombies in a leap of arrogance and pretentious wankery that also pushed me away from the game. They're zombies. Just call them zombies, you wankers. Literally tick all of the zombie boxes. Last of Us, fucking whatever. In general terms, you know, narratively, zombies are just kind of a walking sickness, an infection. Almost always a slowly walking infection, although some zombie movies in particular have gone, oh look, fast zombies, now they're interesting, right? No. They're only even remotely dangerous if they're close enough to touch you, which is why the fast ones feel more threatening, I suppose. And they have no motivation, no machinations, no plans, no plots, no ploys, or tricks, or strategies. They just sort of lumber towards people when they notice them, groaning. That's not interesting. There's no intrigue there. There's nothing clever going on there. No carefully painted incentive or goal in their actions, nothing to argue against or for or wonder if the bad guy actually has a point, not even any emotional drive. Zombies don't love or hate or laugh or cry, they just groan and wander towards you when they notice you. And as individual things, they're not even that hard to fight. You shoot them, you smack them around with a lump of wood or a cricket bat or something, hit them with a car, who cares? The only time they're ever even remotely a real threat is in numbers, or if they manage to jump scare you and sneak up behind you or something. It is a narratively lazy way to have a humanoid enemy, but without having to come up for a reason that a human is shooting other humans. Why are they the bad guys? Well, they're zombies, that's why. Do they have a political or ideological difference? No, they're just bits of flesh that lump towards you. The only good zombie stories happen in spite of the zombies' presence, not because of it. Because the good ones are all character-driven pieces with zombies as a sort of a background force. And frankly, the zombies in those stories are irrelevant to that. The creeping doom could be anything, an airborne disease of any kind, a natural disaster, like a flood or a bushfire, or basically anything relatively slow and at least mildly inconvenient to life as usual. And yes, before someone points it out in the comments, I realise bushfires are not usually slow, but the point stands. So we're circling back again to zombies just being a lazy writer's tool where they don't have to be creative or think about an antagonist with any kind of relatable motivations or a plan more complex than walk towards and bite warm things. In the most generous interpretation of metaphor or allegorical framing for zombies is the loss of self. We fear severe disease or injury taking from us our independence, our choices, our autonomy. That's kind of what the zombies are probably most useful to represent out of all the sort of mythical monsters and stuff. You know, you got the vampires with the psychosexual thing, and you've got the sort of animalistic urges coming up with werewolves and things. And the problem is, again, most writers are just lazy and don't even try to use zombies as an allegory like that. Well, most writers, anyway. But in a wild coincidence, just a fistful of days ago, while literally randomly selecting a single season anime to watch, I selected something called Sankarea. Sankarea Undying Love, specifically. I had no idea what it was about when I clicked on it. It was just very literally a random choice from a list. Turns out, though, it's about zombies. Kind of. And yes, that's why there is a cute girl in the video thumbnail. That is the zombie girl in this anime. It uses a lot of the standard anime tropes, you know, boy meets girl, awkward meeting, common ground, then common understanding, and then empathy, and then interdependence, and then a spanner gets thrown into the works, and then a little titillation and a smack of trauma. Oh, and of course there's a love triangle, because every freaking anime has to have a love triangle of some kind, because we love shipping, and it even has a deadpan, flat affect little sister who is more observant and sensitive than everyone around her. The Kudera type. Apologies on my pronunciation on that one. Anime nerds, correct me. Anyways, it's one of my least favorite anime girl archetypes, but she is actually kind of sweet in her own way. It's a decently well-written version of that anime trope. But for the most part, it's about a zombie film-obsessed, awkward guy he's loved zombie films since he was a little kid, and who now, as a teenager, fantasizes about kissing zombie girls, and who stumbles across a mysterious but incomplete recipe for raising the dead in an old beat-up notebook he stumbles across. And in his attempts to test out this recipe, to recreate the incomplete formula, intending to test it on his recently deceased pet cat, he meets a girl, and she has, oh my god, some very, very uncomfortable abuse trauma. Holy crap. And without spoiling too much of the how and why, if you guessed not long after they meet, she becomes a zombie, and thus essentially the girl of his dreams. You'd be right in that guess. And then comes the codependency and some extremely insensitive choices from the dude when it comes to documenting his success in recreating the zombie raising formula, which are still really bothering me that they didn't even directly address it. Maybe they do in the manga, I don't know. All I know is they didn't address it in the anime, and it really bothers me. If you've seen it or are gonna watch it, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. Yikes. But rather than using the zombie gimmick as a bizarrely specific fetish titillation framing device for the anime, or at least not only that, I mean, anime got a fan service after all, so there is some of that, but instead it's used as something of an interesting lens through which to examine what makes life worth living, what it's like to try and start a new life, what brings happiness, what it means to support the people you love in new choices, what lengths you'll go to, even if you're sacrificing your own needs for theirs. It moves from selfishness to selflessness, from desire to empathy, and it does so in an interesting way. It's not without its disturbing concepts and actions, and cleverly it keeps its gore and shock schlock, that's hard to say, shock schlock, very restrained. So when they use it narratively, it works as a shock. They don't overuse it. Clever, smart writing. But also, rather shockingly, it managed to be legitimately sweet, unexpectedly sensitive, and even managed to be genuinely, earnestly funny in some moments. With well-realized characters, believable motivations, and a pretty honest approach to grounding the characters, at least given the wild functional concept underpinning all of this. In fact, Sankarea might just be my favourite bit of zombie-related media so far. Glad I didn't stop watching the instant I realised it was going to be about zombies. But it, alongside zombies not feeling quite so oversaturated lately, has managed to finally soften my instinctive stance against zombie-related stuff just as a matter of course. I'm willing to entertain the idea of media with zombies in them now, which, just in time for Arizona Sunshine 2, which I do legitimately want to play. I've seen some pre-release gameplay sessions from a couple of VR specialist YouTube channels. I'll link one or two of them in the down below for you there. Go ahead and drop into their comments and tell them Blunty sent you. But it does seem like a damn solid game, and like the original version of the game, it seems like another sort of a really good watermark for VR gaming. It looks good. The gunplay looks really refined. It's got realistic loading mechanics, which look very satisfying. It's got a good variety of both ranged and melee weapons, apparently, and even a grenade launcher, which always fun. But yeah, as a sequel to one of the first truly proper, fully fleshed out, if you'll pardon the zombie wordplay, games of the earliest days of modern VR gaming, it's genuinely intriguing to see what it plays like and will it develop and sort of set a new standard to measure against, like the first game did to at least some extent. Oh, and which, by the way, as is common with sequel releases, the first game is on sale right now at a deep discount, like 80% off, which is another big part of why I'm finally getting around to play it. It was like $8 Australian, why wouldn't you at that point? And man, it's actually not bad, but it really does feel like a first-generation VR game. There's some jank in here, but you know what? It holds up okay, surprisingly well, actually. The humor still works quite well, the moment-to-moment gunplay is pretty good, and simple puzzle solving works great, I'm appreciating that. And I don't know if I'd pay full price for it in the year 2020, whatever, easily worth the less than a tenner I spent on it right now, though. Even if it is just to give me a touch point for comparison on how much more complex and sophisticated the sequel has become. The sequel, by the way, releases December 7th, and it's promising full cross-platform multiplayer functionality across Steam, PlayStation VR 2, and Quest 2, and Quest 3, and two-player co-op campaign mode, and endless horde modes for up to 4 players, and more content to release later in, say it with me now, a roadmap. And yes, Quest 3 players will enjoy an upgraded resolution, while another post-launch Quest 3 upgrade patch scheduled to release late in December will introduce real-time shadows and dynamic objects to make the game look even better on the standalone Quest 3 version. I want it on Steam VR though, for what should be obvious advantages. So yeah, pretty good time for me to stop being so bored pumpkinless by zombie stuff. Did I just say bored pumpkinless? What did my brain mean? What was I trying to say? Am I having a stroke? Am I turning into a zombie? Is my brain shutting down? Brains. Bored pumpkinless. Screw it, I'm owning it. I was bored pumpkinless by zombie stuff, and now I'm not so much. Thanks, unexpectedly interesting weird zombie girl anime, and whatever roll of the galactic dice puts you in front of my eyes earlier this week at just exactly the right time. Just this extremely coincidental, really. Maybe we are living in a simulation. Huh. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty. We'll catch you next time. And thank you as always to the patrons scrolling up above who I have no reason to believe any of them are zombies.